Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode. I want to dive into 7 common cardio mistakes lifters make in a body recomp. But before I dive into that, just want to go over a few ways you can, want to go over my free body recomp checklist. And it's 10 things that you need for a body recomp. I also go over 2 different types of body recomp. What is body recomp, how to do it, the importance of focusing on body comp over just weight. So the link to that is in the show notes. And again, it's completely free. So make sure you go and check that out. All right. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. So I want to talk about 7 common cardio mistakes lifters make in a body recomp. Again, this is really important specifically for lifters, right? Because again, I think the thought is that, hey, it's going to cause you to lose all your muscle. It's not going to be good for muscle growth, but I definitely want to make my case for maybe why that would be the case, because these mistakes would be things that could potentially lead to that. And again, I feel like you definitely are leaving some results on the table if we don't take care of cardio. And again, these are some common mistakes. So let's start off with, again, the lifter who is in better cardiovascular shape is going to be able to do more productive training, which means you're going to have more gains, right? If you can train more and you can have more productive training, like that's inevitably going to lead to more gains over time. So again, we want to being in better cardiovascular shape is going to allow you to really push each set closer to failure. You're going to be able to sit through discomfort a little bit more. And I've always said this when it comes to hypertrophy and muscle growth. Yes, pushing yourself is important, but pushing yourself in the right way and really pushing through that discomfort while maintaining good technique is super important. And by getting in better cardiovascular shape, like you're able to one, sit through that a little bit better. And you're also able to get rid of any short-term fatigue that may be going on. So it's like you're able to not only get to that point to where you can push yourself harder, but from a mental standpoint, but even a physiological standpoint, you're able to get past that, right? Past that. And again, the closer we can get to failure, like that's going to be better for muscle growth. And again, I think the biggest thing that people miss out on when it comes to muscle growth is they maybe lift heavy or they feel like they're training hard, where it's like, hey, my heart rate's high, I really push myself, but they don't really do it in a way that's putting the most tension on their target muscle, and they're not sitting through that discomfort and making sure their technique is also good, right? Because that's the other thing with fatigue is part of it's your ability to be able to maintain cognitive function and to sit through that fatigue. And again, if we're not in as good of cardiovascular shape, that's going to be more challenging, right? You're gonna fatigue quicker, and you're gonna feel it's harder for you to sit through that. So again, that's going to help us with more productive training, more gains. We're going to have more effective and efficient body comp change just because of the fact that we're probably a little bit more metabolically flexible when we're in good cardiovascular shape. More movement overall is going to be helpful if we can, especially if we can recover from it. And then you're going to have more energy from day to day. So you're going to feel better, right? Being in better cardiovascular fitness shape is you're just going to feel better from day to day in terms of energy levels. And the key thing is you're going to be able to do more and you're going to be able to recover from it. So not only are we going to have more productive training, but we'll be able to recover from it faster in between sets and then obviously in between sessions. And you're just going to be able to train a muscle group more often, or again, if you can recover faster, again, more productive training, right? Because you're going to be able to recover and it's going to be good to go and ready. You're going to be able to push it there. And then it's also probably really good from a stress resilience standpoint. Muscle is great for stress resilience, but also being in cardiovascular fitness shape is definitely going to be helpful from a stress resilience. So you're going to be able to handle more stressors essentially, right? And they're not going to have as big of an impact on you as they potentially could. So again, we're also looking at an increase in stress resilience. However, most lifters over 30 brush off cardio. I used to myself, so I'm speaking from experience here for myself, because the main thing being it would cause me to lose muscle. And I also hated it. Most people don't like cardio training for the most part. There are some people that do, but most people don't really like training cardio. But the main thing being, I felt like it was going to cause the interference effect. I was going to lose all my muscle, but I definitely was wrong. And I think at the end of the day, I probably hurt overall health a little bit, and I probably hurt my gains slightly by not doing any cardiovascular training. But again, if you want to look better, perform better, and actually feel better, your cardiovascular fitness matters just as much as your training split and how many days per week we're lifting. And so again, I want to dive into the most common mistakes. So number one is pretty simple, right? We're not doing any, we're just doing steps. Steps and weight training is a good base, and steps have their own unique benefit. I'm trying to make that case in my post recently on like it shouldn't be cardio or steps, it should be cardio and steps. And I just feel like a lot of people are now, oh, hey, you should just steps is enough. And again, I think as a base, it is enough. And from a body comp perspective, it's like cardiovascular fitness training and being in better, like it's not going to have a direct effect on fat loss, obviously, but indirectly, I do think it makes things more effective and efficient for you. You're going to recover better. Again, we go back to the stress resilience because dieting is a stressor on the body. So you're able to handle a little bit more. So I think it indirectly impacts things a lot more than people give it credit for. But steps and cardio need to be different, right? Like the problem with steps is it's not going to provide enough intensity for you to really drive cardiovascular adaptations. Again, maybe initially it will. And if you do a massive amount, maybe you'll have some impact on your cardiovascular fitness if you do an absolute crazy amount. But again, we're missing that intensity piece, right? It would be like doing a lot of lifting volume, but you're staying super far away from failure. It's like, yeah, you'll build some muscle doing that. And especially if you went from doing nothing to doing something, but eventually you're just looking at your sort of maintaining. Now, the difference is, and I guess you could make the same for staying super far away from failure in hypertrophy training with steps. Again, there's a lot of other unique benefits from getting steps in. You're looking at, obviously you're getting increase in overall total daily energy expenditure. So you're going to burn more calories. It's going to be great for appetite regulation. Movement's great for just general health and longevity. And it also has a very low fatigue cost. So you can really do a lot of it and it's not necessarily going to be as fatiguing on the body. So you can get away with doing a lot more of it. And again, we really, outside of our training sessions, we want to try to reduce sedentary time. And so this is where steps can be super helpful here in these situations. And again, I think the key thing is it is also very low fatigue cost. If you are, say, in like a bodybuilding competition prep where you're getting super lean, it's like, yeah, I could see the case where you don't necessarily want to do a ton of cardio in those states because you already have a lot of stress on the body. But in saying that, I still think we should have a base. And as we'll talk about here in today's topic or in this episode, how you program it and what you do is super important when it comes to that. But again, to say that you should pick, oh, hey, you need to do steps and steps is going to be enough for cardiovascular fitness. And then, oh, hey, you don't need to do any cardio for just, again, it's don't do cardio. It's not going to be like you just need to strength train and steps. I just think that's a little misguided. And I think we need to make sure we implement both. And they serve different purposes. And so you could, hopefully I explained that well there in terms of, okay, why we still want to do both. But again, like I said, from an overall body comp standpoint, you could definitely make the case to where you don't need to do any dedicated cardio for specific fat loss purposes. But when we look at the big picture, I think you do need to include some. And again, I promise that it's not going to cause you to lose any muscle if you do some cardio. But as we said, it is going to make your body comp change more effective and efficient, and your lifts are going to improve and you'll recover and be able to do more. So if you're someone who is listening to this and your resting heart rate is over 60, you need to do some structured cardio. We need to throw some in. Even if it's in 40 to 60 range, I still think we need to keep some in to maintain a good base, no matter what. Now, there's other things that we could take as markers that you need to do cardio. But to me, if you're in this above 60, like you definitely need to start doing some like steps, and just weight training is probably not going to be enough for you. We need to add some in. If you're in that 40 to 60 range, again, I would still do some to maintain that, but you could definitely be someone that might benefit. Like you don't necessarily need to get some in from an overall health perspective. But if we want to continue to push our cardiovascular fitness, like I still think it's a good thing to do. So that's mistake number one, is just not doing any and just focusing on steps. Again, they serve different purposes. We definitely want to get steps, but we should still do some conditioning. And again, here's the cool thing is you don't need to do a ton. Just if you hate it, just doing a 20 to 30-minute session a week and some intervals another day, like that's more than enough. The dose that we need to do here is not a lot. Again, especially if it's not your number one goal. If body comp and muscle growth is your number one goal, you really don't need to do a lot. So mistake number two is using it as your main method to lose weight. I do think this is where a lot of negative messaging around cardio happens is, oh, people are just going to hop on the treadmill for 45 minutes plus, go on these long runs to try and quote unquote burn body fat. And that is definitely not a good strategy. It's not going to be your main method to lose body fat. Again, cardio can certainly support that, but your fat loss will really come down to controlling your calories, but also just overall movement. That's really going to be that big driver of fat loss. But the main thing being getting into an energy deficit, and the biggest lever that we can pull with that is certainly our calories there. So again, use cardio to build fitness and improve recovery, but not to quote unquote burn off calories. The extra calorie burn is really just an added bonus. Like it is a nice, I definitely wouldn't say that like the extra cardio burn is, or the extra, it's going to add total daily energy expenditure. And so you're going to burn a little bit more calories overall, but we need to think of that as a bonus, not like the main goal of what we're trying to do. Because again, we want to use cardio to build fitness and improve recovery. So mistake number three that lifters make when it comes to cardio is no progressive overload, right? Just like we would, in order to build muscle, we need to make sure we're getting stronger over time. Well, with our cardio, we need to make sure we're progressing. We need to make sure we're having a way to progress. And I don't think it necessarily means you need to go and run more miles. You need to go and have a quicker mile. I don't think it necessarily, like that could be part of it, but I think the big thing is we do want to have some way to progress versus just going to, I guess a better example would be you're just going in to try and burn more calories. That's not a good progressive overload strategy there. So if cardio feels like you're wasting time or is overly boring, well, you're probably not focused on progressive overload like you do in your lifting. If it just feels mindless, then I totally makes sense why you wouldn't want to do it. So I think we can gamify it a little bit by focusing on progressive overload, just like we would with our lifting. And we know that obviously lifters know that progressive overload is crucial to build muscle, but we tend to forget to do the same for cardio, right? And some ways that we can progressively overload with cardio is, let's say you have an exercise bike, you set the resistance, and let's say we're doing intervals, you have 3-4 rounds of intervals, 2 minutes, 2 minutes off. There's multiple ways we could progress over time. You could track your speed in those intervals and try and increase that over time. You could keep that speed the same and add another round and add another interval. You could slightly decrease the rest time, right? So there's a lot of things that we could do to progressively overload. And those are just some examples that we would do there. And again, the goal is you don't need to do that every single time you go in and do it. Over 2 to 3 months. If you're all over the place, you're not tracking it, it's hard to know if you're actually progressing. And then it does start to feel a bit mindless. And it's like, why am I doing this? And you're doing it. And because you're not necessarily like you're doing cardio, so you're probably progressing at least a little bit, but you're dedicating the time to it. It's like you want to see that return on investment. Just if you went to the gym and you weren't tracking your lifts, you could totally build some muscle, but we're not good at pushing ourselves. Like I've done this where if I didn't have a logbook, like I probably would have stayed 2 or 3 reps away from where I should have been. And so having that can be something that pushes you and actually ensures you're progressing. But like I said, we don't need to progress every single time we go in. It's just, hey, over time, we want to make sure we're progressing. So mistake number 4 is not having any anchor sessions. And so what I mean by that is I want clients to have at least one session per week where you can track either your speed, resistance, or wattage, or whatever it may be. Because a lot of times clients will be like, oh, hey, can I just go and do a run? Or can I go and do this? Can I do elliptical one day and then this another day? And so again, you can do that. But it would be a lot like if you go to the gym and each week you go in, you want to do something different. It's like you could build muscle doing that, and it's better than not doing anything. Again, at some point, we need to make sure we're progressing. And so we want something that can give us data on your output so we can see if you're progressing or not. Like I said, you can get away with random cardio, but just like with weight training, random training may not yield the best results long term. So what I mean by that is if you do, say, 2 sessions a week or 3 sessions a week, at least one of those having a session that we can make sure your output is improving. So if it is your interval session that you want to be your anchor session, that's great. And then your medium intensity cardio session, you just do random things each week, but you just hit a heart rate target. I think that's totally fine. But we need something versus if you have 2 cardio sessions and each of those each week are different, you're not tracking anything, that's where we can run into issues. We at least want one of those to be something that we can monitor and make sure that you're progressing and you have a way to know that you can progressively overload it. Mistake number 5, not tracking your improvements, right? So not tracking your resting heart rates, changes over time, not tracking your subjective markers like your energy and recovery, not tracking your progressive overload, not keeping track of an estimated VO2 max or any output data or any sort of test improvements, right? So again, if you're just randomly doing cardio without tracking to see if you're progressing, it is going to feel like it is a big waste of time. And so we just want to make sure we have something to track to make sure that we're progressing. So because again, I think if you can connect the dots with that, you're more likely to be like, okay, like this is good, this is working, you're going to be more likely to do it. Number 6, turning your weightlifting sessions into cardio. You kind of get the worst of both worlds here. It's not a great stimulus for strength and muscle building, and it's not a great stimulus for cardiovascular improvements. So we want to keep our weights for lifting improvements and our cardio for cardiovascular improvements. Again, I really think of more like group classes, circuit style training. Like, again, if your main goal is to just burn as many calories as possible, I just don't think that I don't think that's being productive towards any one thing other than it's just a hard training, which if you just want to push yourself and see how hard you can push yourself, okay, but we have to understand that we're not necessarily getting any sort of good adaptation with that. If anything, we could be going backwards because it could just be digging into your recovery, right? So you're just going to be in a bigger recovery hole. So again, we just want to make sure we don't turn our weightlifting sessions into cardio. I like to separate them. Hey, weight training is weight training. We're trying to get stronger and build muscle. And then cardio, we're trying to improve our cardiovascular fitness. And it's two different things there. So your weight training is not going to be enough for your cardio. Mistake number 7 is only doing high intensity cardio burn sessions. So we want to work hard. It's important to work hard, but not every session needs to be max heart rate the entire time and burning the most calories. I feel like this is where people tend to run into issues with muscle loss is too much high intensity, high calorie burn cardio paired with low calorie eating. We want to make sure we train across different intensity zones, just like lifting, not every session should be all out. So this is where people screw up with cardio is, hey, it's just about burning calories. And as we talked about, that's not the case. For example, I had a client recently sign up that mentioned, hey, I like to use a Stairmaster because my calorie burn's higher with it. I'm like, that's not really the goal of that, right? It's to improve your output for whatever we're doing. So we're not necessarily just trying to pick the thing that is going to burn the most calories, because on the flip side, the thing that's going to burn the most calories is probably going to be the most fatiguing on your body, which fatigue's not necessarily anything that we need to be overly concerned about. But if we aren't intentional with it and everything is about the biggest calorie burn, and then you're also pairing that with low calories, maybe your lifestyle's off, like you're going to run into burnout issues, injury issues, and you're probably going to be stalled from a body comp standpoint if we just continue to go down that path. So we need to make sure that we're managing our intensity. Like, we're not just pushing intensity 24/7. That's why I like to have an interval session where, hey, you do push intensity, but again, we're not just trying to go as hard as we can. We're trying to find a, because what happened with intervals is, people hear it's high intensity and you need to push it, is they'll do a 2-minute interval and they go all out, and then their output drops. They can only do maybe half of, they can do a minute at a certain speed. And then by the end, they're like doing way less. Again, that means we're going too hard and we need to adjust it, because we need it to be hard, but it needs to be within what you can do right now. But if we just go off of calorie burn, we just would work as intensely as possible, but then our performance and our output drops off, and we're not actually going to improve our cardiovascular fitness. We're just going to, like I said, dig ourselves into a larger recovery hole. So we need to make sure that we balance the intensity overall and make sure we're not just trying to burn the most calories. So another bonus is only doing cardio during your fat loss phases. It needs to be kept in all year round. And saying that, how much you prioritize it can be different from phase to phase. Generally speaking, fat loss is not the time to ramp up cardio, just because we have a lower recovery capacity in a fat loss phase. So the goal of cardio during fat loss is to, one, maintain cardiovascular fitness, and we can use it as a caloric funnel. So that's the bonus, right? And so what I mean by using it as a caloric funnel is it is going to be something that burns calories. So we can use that to our advantage, but the main goal cannot be to burn the most calories and expect that to be the thing that's going to drive fat loss there. But it can be something that helps get you into an energy deficit and burn more calories throughout your day. But again, we can't just expend, like, when it comes to your energy balance, people think it's, hey, I just burn more calories through exercise, through training, just ramp that up as high as possible, and then eat as little as possible, and I'm going to lose fat quick. Or again, they do just try to ramp up the activity side of things. And I think generally speaking, having more activity is good. We need to be more active. I think if we should do as much productive training as we can and what we can recover from. But that becomes the issue, is that when we're in a fat loss phase and we drop our calories, and the larger that gap is between where our calories are at and what we're expending, our body's smart and it's going to compensate. So you may find that you're working extra hard. You would think you're burning, say, 3,000 calories in a day from exercise, but because that energy gap is large, because that energy gap is wide between what you're bringing in and what you're expending throughout the day, your body will find ways to compensate how many calories it's expending throughout the day. So it's like you're working hard, you're doing the extra work, but you're not really getting you're getting the fatigue cost of it, but you're not actually getting any sort of benefit from a fat loss perspective. And that's where people get themselves into trouble, is they really try to decrease calories, ramp up activity, and the body's smart, and you do have to pay that debt back at some point, because there are those adaptations. Whereas, okay, so it's like, all right, cool. Then what would I do in that situation? Would I just not train as much? Potentially. Or you could also increase your calories a little bit to match for that, right? So that doesn't make sense. I'm trying to be in a deficit. I need to eat as little as possible. That's where people, again, go wrong with fat loss. It shouldn't be about just decreasing calories as much as possible. We still need to properly fuel our body as well too, to make sure that we can actually lose body fat and sustain that over multiple weeks versus just doing it for 2 weeks. So that would be a thing that you do, is if you do want to do a lot of training in your fat loss phase, you would need to bring your calories up a little bit to match that. And saying that, there is going to be a ceiling to this, to where you can't go up to 20,000 calories burned and eat 18,000 calories and be in a deficit, right? Like there is going to be a ceiling for what's going to happen on there, from a time perspective, from a recovery perspective, and from a digestion perspective. So yeah. But in our building phases, when you're feeling enough, this can really be the time to ramp up your cardio to really drive your cardiovascular fitness, which wouldn't make sense for people. It's counterintuitive of, wait, so in my building phases, I would want to do more cardio. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I think for 2 reasons. One, for the fueling aspect of it, right? Like, you're going to fuel enough to where you can really do more training volume. But then 2, when we are in a building phase and we're trying to add more muscle, to me, that's important to make sure you at least maintain your current cardiovascular fitness. So the muscle that you do increase can maintain good function as it gets larger and larger. That's a big mistake, is, again, kind of building muscle at all costs. And you get this muscle that is bigger. Maybe it doesn't function as well because you're not keeping up with your cardiovascular fitness. And again, there does come a point and I made this in an episode there comes a point to where these things can become out of balance. And that's just the trade-off that you need to have there in terms of, yeah, your muscles are so big that you can't do enough cardio to maintain that high quality function. But most people don't need to worry about that anyways there. So again, honestly, if anything, the best time to really build your conditioning is going to be when you're eating enough food for the reasons I discussed earlier. As far as, again, what's this going to look like for most people? I think we're looking at, again, for people that are over 30, we're looking at you're looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 training cardio sessions per week. And I think it depends on the phase that you're in, what your current goal is, right? Because if your goal is you're in a building phase and your goal is, hey, I really do need to, I'm above 60 in terms of my resting heart rate. I've never focused on cardio. Maybe we're going to spend a little bit more time focusing on that. And so maybe you do closer to 3 to 4 days. Whereas maybe you're in a fat loss phase, you have pretty good cardiovascular fitness. Your calories are pretty low because you're in a fat loss phase. Maybe we're just going to do 2 days of cardio training because, again, it needs to match your recovery. So in that case, this is going to change on how much we would do. So let's say on average, people are going to do 3. I think that's a good number. Again, it could be 1 less, it could be a little bit higher, but most lifters over 30 that are focused on body composition want to add muscle, but hey, I still I want to make sure my cardiovascular fitness does not degrade, or again, I at least have decent amount. We're looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 sessions per week. And so with that, you're looking at, hey, let's make sure at least one of those are interval style session. Like I said, anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, 1 to 3 minute rest in between. You're doing anywhere from 2 to 5 rounds, 2 to 6, 2 to 7, depending on your recovery and what you can recover from. And again, the goal of that is to either add volume or make sure you're doing it, like increasing the speed at which you can do for that time, et cetera. And then we're looking at 1 to 2 moderate intensity cardio sessions that last from anywhere from 20-ish to 30-ish minutes, right? Thinking that heart rate of 110, 120 to 150-ish. And again, the goal with that is in those 20 to 30 minutes, some ways you could do this is, hey, for 20 minutes, you're going to be at a certain speed. And in the next week, you're going to keep that same speed, and now you're going to bump up to 25 minutes, right? And then maybe the next week you're going to keep the same speed, you're going to bump up to 30 minutes. Now that we're at that speed that we were once doing at 20 minutes, that was an RPE 6.7. Now at 30 minutes is RPE 6.7. So now you've increased that. Now we go back down to 20 minutes, but now we increase our speed and our output, and then we continue to work our way up. So it's, hey, in the span of 3 to 6 months, the speed that your speed and your distance has increased over time. But again, within those 3 to 6 months, it may not necessarily be linear like that there. So that's how I would do that training session as well too. A way to sneak in a little bit of extra cardio as a lifter too is, I got this from Dr. Mike T. Nelson, is he calls it progressive 6. So basically you're just going to do 6 minutes and you're going to ramp up your intensity, where the last minute or two is pretty high intense. And so I will throw that in for clients to get a little bit more cardio stimulation, like before workout or after. I say before because a lot of people are going to skip it if they do it towards the end, but you could do it on your upper body day. And again, you just want to watch your intensity. We probably don't want it to be at an intensity of 10. We're probably looking at, in that last minute or two, it's closer to an 8 RPE out of 10, 8 to 9. And again, maybe not always 9 either, depending on your recovery, right? If recovery is a little bit lower, maybe you're a little bit closer to 8. So that can be a way. And so how you do that is you can do it on the rower, you could do it on the bike. And really what I try to do is, hey, track your distance for those 6 minutes. And just try to get a little bit more distance over time. Again, it may not happen week over week, but over time, let's see that distance improve in those 6 minutes there. So again, takeaway is cardio done right won't feel mindless, and it will amplify your body recomp results. So we definitely want to make sure we add it in. I hope this helps people. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, again, just overall programming and recovery. Like making sure your overall recovery is good, and we're not just we need to manage our intensity and our overall volume. And if we're finding that we're not recovering, you're feeling beat up, not feeling great, you're not progressing in your lifting or your cardio, again, it probably is a recovery thing, and we need to look into that. Maybe we need to adjust your programming and everything like that. So I hope this was helpful. If you guys found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. And if you have any questions on this podcast or any other episodes, just give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active, and I'll talk to you guys soon.